For our documentary, we went to the North Carolina Underwater Archaeological Branch to find out more about the cultural preservation of Civil War artifacts.
It's important to pass all this information on to other generations. We keep saying we're not going to repeat. However, we keep repeating the same mistakes. So I'm thinking, somebody out there, if you pass the information on, can take it, assimilate it, and figure out how did they get there, and maybe avoid getting, to the same place again.
In 1963, the state legislature appropriated funds to build a small preservation laboratory here at Fort Fisher. And in fact, that's where we're sitting in the shell of that original lab. In 1973, the best known Civil War shipwreck was discovered off our coast. That's the USS Monitor, which was the Union ironclad that fought the CSS Virginia up at Hampton Roads. Later in that year of 1862, actually the last day of the year, it was being towed south, ran into a storm off Hatteras, and the Monitor sank off the coast, about 60 miles offshore. So it's outside of our state jurisdiction, but people from this office were involved with the discovery and research on that site for years to come.
There's a lot of blockade runners that ran aground offshore here. They'd be being chased by federal blockaders, and they would just screw up coming in through the inlet and run onto the shoals out there. One of those that this happened to was the Modern Greece. It was the first blockade runner that was excavated in North Carolina. It was really not done to modern archaeological standards, but it kind of got this conservation lab started anyway.
Well, this was the last stronghold for the Confederate, and it was a strategic point of land, and they kept it open for themselves for a long time, so they were doing something right.
Yeah, Wilmington was able to stay open until the very closing months of the Civil War. Of course, Fort Fisher fell in January of 1865, and by February of 1865, the Union troops had moved up and captured Wilmington, so blockade running came to an end. But prior to that, Wilmington was the last major Confederate port that was open to the blockade runners. So this material that the South so desperately needed, war material, uniforms, blankets, all this material, and the blockade runners were also bringing in all types of goods for the South, not just military goods, but even luxury items. But with the fall of Fort Fisher, that ceased. I think it's important for people to have this tangible link to these events, something that they can see. Maybe they may not be able to touch them, but they at least can see them, and it really brings home the story, this history of what was going on at that time.